Next, we're going to look at the scheduling system. To open the scheduler screen, go to the menu bar and click on Scheduler. That opens up into the appointment schedule screen. On the screen, on the left-hand side, you can see the time slots. You have the provider columns. Now, on the top left-hand side, you have got the different views to look at the appointment schedule. You can look it up by day, week, month, and provider view. You also have the calendar, which you can click on to see a particular day's schedule. Next is a legend, which allows you to add appointment statuses and assign colors to the status. You can click on the configure appointment status option, which is the gear that opens up the screen, and over here you can add the new status. Give a name for the status. You can click on the word pick to pick a color for the status, and then you can hit the save to have the status saved. So when you add an appointment, when you select that status, the color that you have assigned for the status, that's a color that you're going to see for that appointment. Any integration customers, partners, should not create statuses unless you check with support. Since these statuses are sync, you would have to add the status. Before you add any statuses, if you're an integration customer, always check with support or your onboarding CSC. To the right of it, you've got a refresh option. You can click on it to refresh the appointment schedule at any time. Also, you have a PDF here. If you want to export the schedule to a PDF to print the schedule, you can click on the PDF. It exports the schedule, which you can print, which you can use for printing the schedule. Next are the options for today, which you can, if you move out of the, move away from today's date, you want to return to today, you can hit the today option to return to today's date. The left and right arrows allow you to move to a previous day or to the next day. Also, there's a three-line option here which brings up the scheduler menu. You can click on the scheduler option to change the options of the schedule, like if you want to change the default time delta, as you can see it's set to 15 minutes here on the left hand side. But if you want to change that to 20 minutes or any other time, you can change that from here. Also, the default schedule status, when you're adding an appointment, which is the status that it's going to default to, here it's set to confirmed. But if you want to change that to any other status from the list, you can select the status to have that status selected when you're adding a new appointment. After making any changes, you can hit save to have that updated. Next is the search appointment. This you can use for searching appointments. You can search the appointment for a patient, you can search for a patient and date range, or you can also search appointments by locations. You also have the option to search appointment by a status. So if you want to search appointment for a patient or for a date range, I'm going to just show you how you could do that. You can just type the patient's name or select or type the MR number of the patient, and it shows the appointments. Now if you also want to take a print of this, you have a PDF on the top left hand side to print the list. If you click on the appointment, it actually opens up into the opens up and shows you the appointment information. So that's how you can search appointments. Next, I'll show you how you can set up provider off times. So you can set up off time by clicking on the set up provider off time option. That brings you to the set up provider off time screen. It shows you the off times that are already entered. You can also use a provider filter and the date filter to find off times that are already added. You can also edit off times by clicking on this edit option, or you can also delete off times. Now if you want to add a new off time, just hit the add off time on the top right hand side. That'll bring you to the add off time screen. Over here you can select what type of off time it is. If it is a recurring off time, you will have to select the type as off time and then select the provider that this off time is for. Next, you want to enter the start and end date and the time that you need blocked. If it's a recurring off time, you can also set the recurrence pattern. So let's say if you want every Mondays for the off time for that time duration, you can check the box for Monday. You can also enter an off time description to display it on that block. You can also enter a phone number here and set the practice status, whether it's open or closed. Once you have done that, you can hit save to have the off time added. Off time will be added to your list. Anytime you want to make changes or delete the off time, you can come back, look for that off time and make the changes, or delete the off time from here. Now, if you want to add an individual off time for a provider, you can always do that from the scheduler. So just right click at the slot that you want blocked. So I'll just click on the create break / off time menu, and it opens up this screen where you can set the off time duration. This is for a single off time, and I will say what the reason for the off time is, and I'll hit save to have that off time added. So this is how you can set single off times as well. Similar to a provider block, you can also set up a holiday, which is for applies to a location or to the practice. So you can hit the plus option on the top right hand side of the screen to add a holiday or a break. If it applies to all locations for the practice, you can select all LE. If it's for a specific location, you can select that location. You can select the break here as a holiday or break. Holiday is always a single day, whereas a break can be multiple, and you can also set up a recurrence pattern. You can enter a description for it and enter the start and end time and the start and end date and hit save to have that break created. Next is the classic view. This you can also use to change the scheduler view to a classic view. So there's a different theme that you can look at the schedule. So that's a classic view option is also available for that. Also on the right, you've got a search. This allows you to filter the appointment schedule. So let's say if you want to switch to a different location schedule, you can click here on the legal entity dropdown and select the other location's schedule. Or any locations that are set up, you could click and select that location to see that location schedule. Similarly, you have options to filter by provider. You can also change the duration that you want to look at the schedule, and start and end time you can also see here. Now let's look at how you can add appointments. So to add an appointment, just click on any of the empty slot, and once you click on that, it opens up into the appointment entry screen. Now if it's an existing patient, just type in the patient's name or patient's record number. So once you have typed in the patient's name, you can see it shows from the list. You can select the patient. Now once a patient is selected, you can also see that it shows on the right hand side all the patient's information. Next you can enter the reason for the visit. Next you can select the schedule status. Now remember, this is the field that also drives the color of the appointment. So the status that you select, the color that's assigned for the status, that's the color that you're going to see for this appointment. You can also select the schedule type. If you want to change the start time, the slot that you clicked on, that's the time that you're going to see here. But you can also change the time from using the drop down. You also have appointment duration. You can, if you want to change the duration, you can change the appointment duration from here. Next you can also select the exam room and hit save here at the bottom to have the appointment added. Also there are these different tabs that you can see appointment information. So you have the billing information tab where you can see the insurance, primary insurances for secondary and tertiary insurance for the patient. You can also see what is collectible from this patient today. You also have financial summary tab where you can see all the patient's financial summary, which is insurance and patient. You also have an aging that you can look at. There's a print letter tab that gives you options to print letters like demographics sheets, Superbill. All this can be printed from here. The notes tab gives you the field to add a note for the appointment. Now you can either save an individual appointment, or you also have a recurring appointment option which you can use for adding recurring appointments. Also at the top here you have these different options which you can use for viewing previous payments of the patient, adding a new payment, ledger, and checking eligibility. We'll also be looking at these options from the appointment shortcut options. So first let me just add an appointment here. I'll just hit the save to add that individual appointment. So that appointment is added at that slot. Now if you want to double book somebody at the same slot, you can do that. If you want to double book, just click on the empty space here. This should bring up the appointment shortcut options. Once it brings up the options, you can click on the pencil to edit the appointment. As the appointment edit screen opens, you can click on the overbook checkbox. It clears a patient field. You can select the next patient you want at that same slot. So I'll just type in the next patient's name and I'll select the patient and we'll enter the reason, appointment reason, and schedule status, schedule type, duration, everything else just as we did for the other appointment, and then we can just hit save to have the appointment saved at the same slot. So you can see this way you can double book and triple book appointments at one slot. Now I'm going to click again on this free space here on the appointment, which will then bring up the appointment shortcuts. Now let's look at the other shortcut options. You can left arrow will check in the patient or change the status to a checked in status. You also have a right arrow which you can change it to a checked out status. So when the patient checks out, you can change it to a checked out status. The calendar allows you to create a follow-up appointment. So if you want to create a follow-up appointment for this patient, just click on that and it opens up the screen where you can create the follow-up appointment. So let's say we need to add an appointment for this patient a week away. So we can select the status you want for that follow-up appointment. Select the date. So let's say it's for the 26th. I'll select that date. And the time and the duration and hit create, which will create a follow-up appointment at that time and slot. So that's how you can create a follow-up appointment. Next is the umbrella, which opens up into the eligibility verification screen where you can run eligibility checks. There's a check now option. You can hit that to run the eligibility check for this patient. You'll get the eligibility response displayed on this section. The next dollar symbol is for adding a payment. So let's say the patient made a co-payment or made a payment at the time of service. So this opens up into the add payment screen. You can enter the date of the payment here. It'll always default to today's date. Now on the payment type, you can select what type of payment they're making, whether it's a copay, deductible, self-pay, co-insurance, whatever the type is, you can select that from the drop-down list. The patient's name is copied from the appointment. The amount, you can enter the amount that they paid into the total amount field. You can also select how they made the payment, whether it was a cash, check, credit card, or any other method of payment. So once you've selected that, next you can either just hit the save to have the payment added to the patient's account, or you can hit save and print, which will add the payment to the patient's account and also bring you to a receipt screen where you can print the receipt. So I'll hit the save and print, which will add that into the patient's account. Now that money will show as on account in the patient's account, which is an unapplied payment status. So you can see that money if you go to the patient's ledger or financial summary, you would actually see that money show up as on account. It'll remain on account until that money is applied to the patient's charge. Next, here on the screen, once the receipt opens up, you can hit the print document to have the receipt printed and given to the patient. Next is the SB, which opens up the Superbill. This generates a Superbill, and this is typically used by the doctors or the providers to mark the services that were done for the day. So you can mark the CPT's diagnoses and pass it on to this biller, to the biller, so the biller can actually use that to enter the charge. The next is a financial summary, which you can click on to see the patient's financial summary. It's typically what we saw within the appointment screen, which is the collectibles and the financial, the patient and insurance financial. You also do have options from here to go to the patient's ledger and look up the patient's schedule history. We'll be looking at those two options in just a moment from the appointment shortcut screen or appointment shortcut option. So over here, the next after financial summary is the ledger. Click on that. It opens up the ledger, which is a detailed financials. So at the top right hand side, you can see the totals. Towards the center, you can see all the charge details. And at the far bottom, you have an aging summary. You can also export the ledger to PDF or to spreadsheet. So those are the two options on the top left hand side. If you would like to filter the ledger, you can also filter by date of service or transaction date. You also have other filters like legal entity and provider as well. You can filter by. Next is the schedule history. You click on it and it opens an appointment schedule history for the patient. The next is a recalls or alert screen. You can click here and see all the alerts that are added. If you want to modify the alert, you can also do that from here. The next is the L1 and the L2, which is for labels 1 and label 2. So these are the two different label formats that you can print. So that's one label format, and there's another label format. Next, the paper pencil icon is for adding a patient note. You can click here to add a note for the patient. You can just enter the note and hit save to have the note added into the patient note screen. You can also drag and drop appointments if needed. If you would like to drag or move the appointment to another slot, you can always drag and drop the appointments as well. So that was all on the appointment schedule, how you can add appointments and as well as edit appointments. We would now go into the reports and look at some of the important appointment reports that you can run. So to go to the report screen, you can click on the Report Central. This is where the report package is. If you have any reports added to your favorites, you will see that it opens up right into the Favorites tab. You can go to the Reports tab, and if you would like to add any report on your list to the favorites, you can just star that report, click on the star, and that will add to the Favorites tab. So that way you don't have to actually look for reports that you frequently run. It just opens up into the Favorites tab, and you can find the report easily on the Favorites tab. Now let's look at some reports that you can run. As I was saying, the reports is where the report package is, and the first thing is about the report screen is that the reports are all categorized and numbered, as you can see here. So the first section here is for the scheduler. The A1 is an appointment schedule report, which is a very detailed schedule report. You can run this report to see all the appointment detail information. So I'll run this for date range here, and you can see that it'll show the appointments for that day or date range, and you can hit the PDF on the top left hand side to export that to PDF. The PDF is where you would see all the appointment details. So you can see that it shows all the appointment details like the appointment type, appointment date and time. It also shows the patient's name, the phone number, the provider, date of birth, insurance, the insurance ID number. It also has the appointment type and phone, appointment source, appointment status. Also it shows the balances of the patient and the appointment reason as well. So it's a very detailed appointment report. Now if you would like to see a more summarized report, you can always run the appointment worksheet or the appointment status report. Both reports are quite summarized, and you can run this appointment worksheet can be run to an export to spreadsheet or PDF option. So this is a very summarized report. This is got just the basic information, appointment info like the time, the duration, name of the patient, status, and request reason. Similar to that is the appointment status report. This also I would export this to the PDF, and this shows the appointments and their statuses. Another important report you can run is the appointment end of day reconciliation sheet report. This report shows you all the appointments for the day and the copays that are collected for those appointments. So you can see that this typically you can run it for a day, and you can see what all appointments you have for the day and if there is any copay that was collected for those appointments. If you also had a copay amount set up on the patient's insurance screen, it'll also show you the amount that was set up on the patient insurance or the amount that was supposed to be collected. And it'll show you what was actually collected from the appeal. Always note, it'll only show the collected amount here if this amount was added from the appointment schedule screen. If it is added from any other place, like you can add payments from patient screen, you can also add payments from payment entry screen, those payments will not show up on this report. This will only show if you have added the payment from the appointment schedule screen. And also on this report at the bottom, you can see it shows a summary. This report can be exported to spreadsheet and to PDF. There are also some other reports that you can run, like the missed or canceled appointments list. If you want to look at that, you can do that. If you use the system's appointment reminder function, then you can also use this report to see all the appointments that were sent or reminders that were sent out and how they were sent out, whether email or text. And there's also an eligibility status report, which you can run to run a batch eligibility. So you can run a batch eligibility from that report. So those are some of the important reports that you can run from the system. Now we'll turn it on to the attendees for any questions. So that's all in this part of the webinar. If there are any questions, please do type them into your questions section. Please type your questions into the webinar control panel.